And all of a sudden, as soon as I took office, oh my God, how dare he investigate Diana Turan or Max Huntsman, the Inspector General? Turns out we stumbled upon this data breach by accident my first month on the job. We called in the FBI, we called in the state attorney general, said, this is what we got a lot of legs to it. We'd like to know if you want to investigate or we can investigate it ourselves, because it involved employees of the department under the prior administration and the Inspector General, a county appointee. They somehow believed that they were above the law. They appointed 15 of the most woke people you could find in the entire county of LA, and they put them on there. What did they do? They voted unanimously to get rid of all cops on the trains and buses. That is the mess you have today, and they refused to take ownership of it. I was a retired lieutenant running for sheriff. I was not the subject of any investigation, nor did I have any scandalous anything in my background. So what legitimate reason would Diana Turan have to download my files, or Max Huntsman, the Inspector General? Political purposes only, which is illegal.
Hello, America. Welcome to Your Leo Nation. I am the Chief, Mark Garrett, and today we are absolutely honored to have with us former Sheriff of Los Angeles County Sheriff Department, Alex Villanueva. Sheriff, how are you today?
Oh, not too bad. And yourself, Mark?
Well, doing great. I was just telling our producer, Anthony, back there that it's getting hot here in Florida. It's about that time of year where the humidity's picking up, the heat's coming on. We're actually enjoying it. But you got a different kind of heat there in California. It never stops. And there are some hot topics. And I was reading some of the stuff the other day, and I thought, man, that the person to talk about this is no other than yourself. And so we really do appreciate you being on. Just before we kick off a couple of these topics, I'm excited to talk with you about. I know you have your live show on, and you've been very busy. What have you been up to in support of the rule of law that we promote so much here on Your Leo Nation?
Well, earlier this year, I took the time out of my schedule to run against one of the supervisors who election, Janice Hahn. That's the 4th district, which I live in. And we unfortunately were not able to get her under percent. The LA County Democrat, Evan Well, and is formidable. The candidate themselves are worthless. They won't stand a chance. They don't even dare get on stage with me to debate me. They just rely on the machine to basically do all the ballot harvesting line. And the papers accommodate this, all the local press. No one asks, hey, where's the debate? Oh, no. And major transformative issues that are arising in county government that need to be addressed, and everyone's like pretending it's a party and there's nothing to worry about. And we're like the Titanic that already hit the iceberg and it's still floating, but it's mortally wounded. And these people, no, they're just rearranging the deck chairs with not a care in their minds.
Well, I know these people that you're talking about, and the person you ran against. And it's interesting you bring up that fact that nobody wants to debate. They got the big blue machine in full gear. It sounds like a similar, larger election that's pending here in the fall going on, real similarities. And I bring that up, Sheriff, because you are a registered Democrat, but you talk about the woke Democrat Party, the wokeness that we are all suffering under right now nationwide, especially there in California, and particularly there in Los Angeles County. And I would imagine, more than imagine, because I read it and I watch it, but I mean, you've been scapegoated by your own party so much because you speak out against things that don't align with your personal values. Is that fair to say?
Oh, very fair to say, but check this out. And when my personal values, when I first came on board as sheriff, and I had campaigned about getting ICE out of the jails, I know that's something that conservatives, they kind of go, well, wait a minute, wait, we're not all about that. But when you're the sheriff of the county, you have 1 million undocumented residents in your county, you can't have ICE working hand in hand with local law enforcement, because that means that's 1 million people that are going to pick up the phone to call 911. And they both need a job. Definitely need a job. They have to do it, but they just can't do it together. So I separated the two. And ICE, definitely, they can knock themselves out, go into the state prisons and pick up the rapists, the murderers, and all that good stuff. And I think we found a happy medium where it worked. And if ICE came along with a warrant, like a criminal warrant, well, then we'd, of course, we'd honor it. And the cry from the right was, oh my God, how dare you? You're going to endanger people's lives. And now I did the math. It's actually more dangerous when they work together than if we separate the two parties. And we tracked the people that were released. Their recidivism rate was lower than the people that were U.S. citizens being released. So I think we did okay. But here's where it gets really weird. What I gave to the LA County Democratic Party, to the Coalition of Humane Immigrant Rights Los Angeles, to the ACLU of Southern California, I gave them something in writing with a signed with my signature that they've been fighting for 30 years. 30 years railing about the need to get ICE out of this and that. And I gave it to them. And what did they do? Oh, I got wind. And Hilda Solis, one of the board of supervisors, she actually reached out to La Opinión, which is a Spanish newspaper, to Chirala, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, and told them, do not give any credit to the sheriff for this. That's how powerful that blue machine is, because they already determined they could not have an honest sheriff in office. So one thing to start chipping away at that popularity is make sure he's despised by the left, even when he gives them a signature thing that they were fighting for decades. And I handed it to him, and oh my God, the language was just, and it was comical. He double crossed us. He did a bait and switch. He just used a contract to do the same job. All this crap, but we were just following the law, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how dirty County Democratic Party is. I mean, they're criminally dirty.
Well, by the way, I think literally that's been proven. I
Yes.
think time and time again, we have people that are under indictment that are looking at federal prison time. So I think what you're saying is borne out by the facts that it's not just a claim on your part. It's factually true. And again, I was a chief in the same county. I was retiring kind of when you were getting to speed. We didn't have a lot of time to work together. I mean, on a personal basis, although we still had overlapping responsibilities there in Los Angeles County. But I was around and worked with a lot of the people that you're referring to, and I saw a lot of stuff behind the scenes. Now, of course, being a county employee, being a county elected official, you saw a lot more of it than I did on an intimate basis. One of the things that you saw, I think, in a lot of ways, Sheriff, you were kind of Nostradamus. I mean, on a lot of topics. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anything about you until, when you actually ran for sheriff. And I was a skeptic. I knew your opponent. I know him quite well. And it wasn't until kind of down the road I started seeing some of the things that you were either predicting or you were railing against or you had concerns about that started coming to fruition or started becoming more apparent. And when I saw people from your own party, now, Sheriff, this is what really start getting my wheels thinking is, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Why are people in his own party so hard on this guy? Why are they not working with him? Why are they just demeaning him outright with virtually every strategy he wants to undertake? And I thought, maybe he's turning over some stones in that department or in the county that people are not happy about. One of the things that has recently come to light that, again, you were all over, and I wasn't aware of this until I read this article. I missed this from you, was the indictment of Assistant DA, LA County DA Diana Taran, or Taryn, to get the pronunciation right.
I think
Is it Taran? Now,
or
she was
terror.
charged with
Same thing.
we'll call her Diana or DT, but she was charged with 11 felonies by the Attorney General, Rob Bonta. Again, another dyed in the wool blue Democrat. And I think that he is an ally of George Gascon, but she's an assistant DA, kind of a right-hand person, as far as I know, with Gascon, but she was charged with 11 felonies. And I would like for you to talk about what those felonies are, what the charges are, and how you why you're so intimately aware of the genesis of this entire case.
Well, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that when I took office, I started uncovering things that the establishment wanted to keep covered. And remember, up until I took office, every sheriff that preceded me was always part of the political establishment. Even Baca, even though they didn't like him at the beginning, but he did something very important that allowed him to be reelected 3 times after winning over Sherman Block. That he agreed to keep the county secrets, to look the other way when it was required, to not ask too many questions under obvious situations of corruption. They're begging for investigation. That was the implicit contract. You do that, and we're going to leave you alone. And that was Lee Baca. That was John Scott briefly. Then it was Jim McDonald. And now fast forward to the new guy, Robert Luna. That's exactly what he's doing. Look the other way, and we'll leave you alone. And when I took office, I did not work my way up through the political establishment where people had my pink slip or I owed something to anybody. No, I literally came from the line, retired, called out the guy, and defeated him. And I did it by actually campaigning on ICE in the jails, getting body worn cameras, transparency issues, making employment fair so people don't lose their job for political reason, but for actual facts, evidence. And that due process thing was important. I pushed for it. I got the Democratic Party to understand it. It was important. I got the unions of Federation of Labor to understand it. And all of a sudden, as soon as I took office, oh my God, how dare he investigate Diana Turan or Max Huntsman, the Inspector General? Doesn't he know that that's a conflict of interest? I mean, you heard everything. But it turns out we stumbled upon this data breach by accident my first month on the job. And we called in the FBI, we called in the state attorney general, said, this is what we got. It's got a lot of legs to it. And we'd like to know if you want to investigate or we can investigate it ourselves, because it involved employees of the department under the prior administration and the inspector general, a county appointee. They somehow believe that they were above the law. In fact, Max Huntsman just recently said that I don't have the legal authority to investigate him as the inspector general, which strange. I didn't see that in the state constitution, but that's Max Huntsman constitution for you. So they attorney general said, you know what, there's nothing stopping you from investigating this. Go ahead. The FBI said, well, we don't see a federal angle on this quite yet, but we'll lend you technical assistance. We're talking, this is back in January of 2019. I'd just been in office about a month. We start the process in good faith. We get to a point where we develop the information. We realize, wow, there's a potential criminal culpability from the inspector general, from Diana Turan, for unlawfully accessing and removing files from the department. Up to the weekend before I was sworn in, they were downloading files on the weekend on a zip drive, like under cover of darkness. That's how dirty it was. And we're
Now,
talking.
sure, I want to stop you there because I want people to understand. I've read quite a bit about this in preparation for the podcast. Can you explain what her purpose? Put that in quotes. What was her purpose? What was her reasoning for being inside the sheriff's department at that time?
She was a member of the Office of Policing Advisor for Jim McDonald, not working as an attorney, but as a consultant and constitutional policing advisor. And that was something that we had, the Office of Independent Review that preceded it. That was under Baca, and it kind of morphed over time. Then it separated into the Inspector General, Constitutional Policing Advisor for the Sheriff's Department, Civilian Oversight Commission, all that crap. And when we uncovered this and we realized, wow, this is illegal, because these are personnel files. And the personnel file, the very first one that was downloaded, was mine. I was a retired lieutenant running for sheriff. I was not the subject of any investigation, nor did I have any scandalous anything in my background. So what legitimate reason would Diana Turan have to download my files, or Max Huntsman, the inspector general? Political purposes only, which is illegal. And they did it for dozens of employees, and ended up being like 2,400 files, individual files, a massive data breach. We initiated investigation. At one point, when we developed enough information, I did my due diligence and I informed the board of supervisors, hey, we have this issue with these employees, former employees, and employees of the county engaging in this felonious conduct, that they're suspects, and we're investigating. Do your due diligence and relieve duty, whatever the normal protocol is. They basically told me to pound sand. They kept them in their job knowing that they were felony suspects under investigation, which you know very well. Who does that? Because they're compromised at that point. And then from that, oh my God, a torrent of retaliation came out of the Inspector General, Max Huntsman. And he started cranking out report after report that, oh my God, I'm a criminal. I did this, I did that. And I mean, it was kind of laughable, really, when you looked at what he was writing, but it was very clear there was retaliation for the fact that we had the audacity to investigate him. He thought he was above the law. Diana Turan actually was working at his behest, because we even have the emails where he's instructing her to, hey, go on the weekend and use an external hard drive and all that stuff to defeat a process that required the sheriff's approval written by signature, because we have a memorandum of agreement between the inspector general and the sheriff at the time, and it was very specific in what they could get and how they could get it, and they just blew that all by. So fast forward about 2 years later, we gave the case to the attorney general. We finished our investigation, gave it to them. I don't know what they did with it. I guess they did some more investigation, and then they come up with a couple of weeks ago where they indicted Turan.
Yeah. Now, again, she was handpicked to come over to the DA's office by Gascon, and the allegations that I understand from these indictments are that some of these files that were allegedly illegally obtained have been used in the DA's office in the course of their investigations, filings, backgrounds. Now, so I mean, theoretically, this could be going uphill to a higher party. Now, one of the things I want to go back up a little bit is that if I understand, Sheriff, this was done partly under the auspices of Brady. And for people who don't understand Brady, this is to look into the integrity of officers for purposes of trial testimony and things like this. You know, the veracity in trial, and if they have been deemed to be dishonest, that their credibility can be impeached and things like this. Am I getting that right? Is that part of the reasoning for her being there and having any access to officers' files?
Well, she was in legal hot water prior because she decided on her own to create her own Brady list. She made a
Uh-huh.
list of 300 deputies. You may have heard about that. And ALAS, the
Yes.
deputies union, went to court and challenged that. And that went all the way
Mhm.
up to the California Supreme Court, and ALAS prevailed. Basically, the sheriff is not obligated to turn material over unless it knows and it generates it. In other words,
Right.
we're not supposed to go fishing for it. If it comes
Correct.
up, well, then we provide it, which we agreed with. Okay,
Mhm.
that's fine. That's the way it should be. And so she created her own Brady list on her own criteria. And
Yeah. This is it, I mean, it sounds like somebody, you know, they wanted had a predetermined outcome and with this. So do you know the relationship between Gascon and Turan? Do they have a previous relationship? I'm talking professional relationship.
not that I'm aware of, but you got to
Okay.
remember that she was publicly identified as a felony suspect way before Gascon decided to hire her in the DA's office. But she got bounced around because when I took office, we terminated her employment. She was a will employee, and then right away the CEO's office picked her up, put her in the Inspector General's office under Max Huntsman. And then
Mhm.
from there, she went to the public defender, I think. And then from there, she jumped over to the DA's office. So she was bouncing around this whole time when she really should have been just relieved of duty until
Yeah.
this was sorted out. That would have been the
And
ethical and appropriate thing.
it would have been, I think. And when you say identified as a felony suspect, or in other words, this was as a result of the investigation that you initiated that you're talking about. Is
Yes.
that right? That's right. In other words, there's information here that someone doesn't have to be found guilty of a particular violation, at least legally, this happens all the time in law enforcement administratively. You say, listen, our administrative investigation leads us to believe that you engaged in certain behavior that we can't work with, and so we're not going to hire you, or we're going to fire you. You don't have to be criminally charged, or certainly not criminally convicted in in order for some agency or entity to take the appropriate action, which you're talking about right now. So now we have this person who's under indictment. What do you think is the motivation of Bonta, the California Attorney General, to indict her, knowing that he is an ally of George Gascon?
Well, I'm gonna remember this is not the only case that he has in his docket. We also delivered him the case of Sachi Hamai, the former CEO who was given a pretty much a golden parachute of $1.5 million, where they falsely accused me of harassment of the CEO somehow. And she's
Mhm.
a public official. Her only recourse was actually to file a workers' comp claim, not get $1.5 million with no uncontested. So that for us, that was a crime itself, gift of public funds. We referred that matter to the AG's office. Then we have the Sheila Kuehl, Patty Giggins peace over violence investigation, which is a lot more evidence on that than they used to convict Mark Ridley Thomas, just to put it in
Yes.
perspective. That case, we ended up giving it to the AG because they demanded it after Sheila Kuehl accused Max Huntsman and the county council of tipping her off on us serving the search warrants. In fact, she did that live on TV, which kind of astonished everybody. So that one, obviously, we couldn't investigate because we were the victims of that one, obstruction of justice. So we asked
Right.
the AG, hey, please investigate that. They said, okay, I'll take that, but I'm going to take the whole peace over violence thing too. So we're
And,
okay, it's yours. So he's got all these things on his docket. He wants to
mhm.
go for higher office that we know of, but
You
at
got
the
to
same
clear some
time,
things out here, probably. The reason I'm smirking right now, I'm laughing because I remember that when Sheila Kuehl was in front of her house and that morning. Oh yeah, well I got a phone call last night that they're that they're
you know
coming.
what
I'm
it meant.
thinking, oh yeah. I was like scratching my head. Said, how can you be this foolish?
By the way,
I
that's a
guess about
Yale or
honest.
Harvard.
I mean, she was.
It's a Yale or Harvard graduate. I mean, one of the two. I
This
can't
is
remember which
like,
one I went to,
yeah,
but she
it
may want to get her
shows you the
money back.
value. Yeah, it shows you the values of these quote unquote high education.
Something, Mark, is important though. He has all these
Hmm,
cases on his docket. If he doesn't investigate them, he might himself be the subject of obstruction of justice, because that means he just put him in the locker, or like old, Chicky Hearns, the balls in the refrigerator, and he
yes.
just put him in the refrigerator and not do anything with him. That actually is obstruction of justice as well. So a federal Department of Justice that might be so enamored to see what's going on in California, which the impetus may be there. So maybe he's thinking, you know what, maybe I should start actually doing my job and clean these things out. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? It listen, and that's why I say a minute ago, he may want to clean some of these things out just for that reason, for the appearance of, hey, I'm doing my job and I can't prosecute every case, obviously, things like that, but I'm going to do some of it. I was thinking the same thing. But you and I know that California is it is such a mess. And I'm using that word lightly. Listen, it's an S hole when it comes to the rule of law from the top down. And it was one of the reasons that it was reason 178 that I was so glad to get out of California. I
Oh,
miss a lot of it, but I don't miss it enough to stay there and love it here in free state of Florida. So, Sheriff, moving on, this editorial in the LA Times about LA Metropolitan District, which runs every bus and all the trains and other stuff. I say runs it. I mean, that's probably an overstatement, barely. LA Metro is one of the most, and again, this is an entity that I worked with a lot. I was a lieutenant in West Los Angeles, and for those of you listening all across the country, the West Los Angeles CHP office is actually in Culver City against the west side of Los Angeles, and responsible for part of one of the major arteries in all of the country, the 405. And about 10, what is it, 12, 14 years ago, there was a major construction with the Mulholland Bridge. And the freeway had to be shut down both directions over a period of weeks to build this new bridge over the 405. And that was my first real immersion with LA Metro. And I didn't understand how, but I found out that they were so incredibly powerful and influential. And I still to this day don't really understand how LA Metro functions because they have their fingers, their tentacles in about every crack and crevice of not only Los Angeles County, but extending Los Angeles outside of Los Angeles County. With that said, they run the subways, the trains, the light rail in Los Angeles County. And it is comparable to the crime that's occurring in the New York subways, maybe even worse in a lot of ways with LA Metro. It's absolute disaster. They've tried they tried time and time again and different formulas with different agencies over the years, and nothing seems to work. Now, I don't think it has to do with the agencies themselves. And this is where I'm gonna let you take it over here because at one time it was pretty much all a LA County Sheriff that was responsible for this. So with that said, I want you to talk about what's going on with them right now, what the crime looks like. I know you've ridden, I've watched your videos riding the rails, Sheriff. It's been fantastic. I want you to talk about your experiences from a personal point of view, post sheriffhood, and while you were actually working as the sheriff for Los Angeles County.
Well, let me take you back a couple of years to actually a little more to 2017 was the infamous point of departure of the MTA system. Prior to mid 2017, the sheriff's department had the entire contract. We used full-time personnel, not overtime. We had full-time personnel from the department, and they were deployed on the trains, the buses, and all the different bells and whistles that we had. We enforced fare evasion. We enforced quality of life issues. Bad guys came on the train, bad guys off the train. And people would go on the trains left and right. There was at full capacity. Families could bring small children on the train. You wouldn't have to see a grown man shooting up heroin and defecating right in front of you, which is now happens on a daily basis. And Eric Garcetti and the political establishment found some political value in splitting up the contract and giving a lot of overtime to LAPD officers because they were going to man it. They didn't have the bodies to man it. They were going to manage their portion of it strictly on overtime. So that was a gift to the police protectively for Eric Garcetti, who was running for election or re-election at the time, I think election. And from that point, the board of directors of the MTA went very progressive or woke, according to some. And then all of a sudden, we don't want cops on the trains. We think that passengers are fearful of cops. It harms them. So let's not get cops on the train. Let's replace them with security officers. We don't want them enforcing fare evasion or quality of life issues. We'll have private security do that, which, by the way, they just dumped the guy that knifed one of them just yesterday. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't.
Yes. And then, you know what? We can even reduce the presence of law enforcement even more by hiring ambassadors in neon green shirts, and they'll be the goodwill ambassadors. We'll make everybody feel cheerful and guide them on their way. And if there's a problem, they'll call in, especially highly trained people that are going to intervene on the homeless and all that. So they invited all the homeless on the trains because now the trains are a shelter for the homeless. Once they did that,
not to mention the stations, as well.
Platforms, trains. So they did a series of spectacularly stupid decisions, all based on progressive ideology, not on facts, not even on their own ridership surveys that told them, we want to see more cops. We feel safe when there's cops present. Give me more cops. And what do they do? Let's get rid of as many cops as we can because it doesn't fit their narrative. Then you have ACT LA, which is an activist group that their goal is to get rid of all trains and have it a free fare and basically a free for all. And then you have they created a public safety advisory committee, and they appointed 15 of the most woke people you could find in the entire county of LA, and they put them on there. What did they do? They voted unanimously to get rid of all cops on the trains and buses. That is the mess you have today, and they refuse to take ownership of it.
You know, this is like defund the police on steroids in this particular area, and this is actually coming from it's not just a cultural thing. These are elected officials. Actually, like I said, they're
Mhm.
board members, but they're bureaucrats. But they actually have political power. They actually have policy power. I mean, I was reading this editorial, and in 2023, there were 160 assaults on transit workers. We're not even talking about the patrons. I mean, that's got to be thousands of assaults.
Yep.
And but just on the transit workers, 160 assaults. It's mind-boggling. And when you said they went out and found the wokest possible people to comprise this body, now they are considering creating their own, and maybe you touched on this, but their own in-house security
Well,
agency.
no,
Is
they want to
this
create.
or sworn?
You're old enough to remember
Sworn?
the RTDPD, right? Remember that?
Yes, of course. I'm
What?
60. We're in the same ballpark, and I grew up about 6 blocks from the RTD terminal where I worked during the Rodney King riots. I was down
Right.
there, and
I
yeah,
know
so I
well.
know exactly RTD. Yes.
They want to revive that, create their own Metro MTA PD. And of course, these geniuses can't figure out that both the sheriffs and the LAP are struggling to hire people. What makes
Mhm.
you think that you're going to find enough cops to sign up for an agency that is literally governed by woke wonders? It ain't going to happen.
It- It's not going to happen, and this is that. I hope people are listening to this. Hope you are listening to you from ultimately in the inside, being a sheriff there from 2018 to 22, and really and me too. I lived there for 60 years. I was the chief there 30 years from the Highway Patrol. That this state and this county we're talking about right now, Los Angeles County, elected officials and bureaucrats, decision makers are engaging in behavior that, from I think our point of view, is literally ludicrous.
Hmm.
That they're going to try, like you said, they're going to try to create these applicants that nobody else can find. LAPD and Ohio Patrol and Sheriff Department and my friends over at Pasadena Police Department and you name it are all looking for good people to do the fine work of law enforcement officers, and they want to now create an additional agency in Los Angeles County when they have screwed it up. They've promoted this stuff. They promoted to defund the police. They have created the homeless problem. And the homeless problem, of course, and now I'm getting on my soapbox here because when I hear you, it fires me up. These are the same people, ladies and gentlemen, that they have created the homeless problem that we are now seeing in Los Angeles County and in California in general. They are begging more and more homeless people to come in. I'm sorry. I am sorry. These people are on drugs. They have mental, psychological, emotional issues. Many of them were released because of Prop 47, AB 109, or didn't go to prison because of these different legislative acts. And now they are the ones that are populating Los Angeles County and growing like a mushroom. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to engage in criminal behavior. These are the same people who have championed these policies. And
Hmm.
now they want to come in and pee on the fire that they're responsible for starting. There's not a question there for you, Sheriff. It's just an editorial I wanted to throw in there because I feel
Well,
your pain. Yep.
well, Mark, it gets worse.
Is that
Hard to believe.
possible?
Oh, yes, because they're not doing this in a vacuum. They're relying on a very accommodating local media and the LA Times in particular to not report when someone is set on fire on the goal line. That happened 2 years ago, and
Yes.
he was finally made public just a couple of weeks ago on Fox LA. We happened across him by chance at a the John Colville show. They were gathering signatures to repeal Prop 47, the new version of repealing 47.
Mhm.
We went there and we signed it. And along this guy, yeah, I was on the train. They set me on fire. Wow. So we kind of connected. And I mean, the guy it's a miracle that he survived. It was never reported by the local press that a guy was set on fire on the train twice on the same trip. That's how bad it was. And when we had case after case with video, compelling video evidence of all the violence, I was going to release that publicly. And I got threatened legally by the MTA's council, saying that's property of the MTA. You cannot release it. But wait a minute, whatever happened to this whole thing about transparency? And
Yep.
for that, it was about the perception of safety, and that was going to puncture the perception. And they didn't give a rat's ass about the actual safety. It's more about selling the idea of perception. So you get Lindsay Horvath goes on the subway at 5 in the morning that they scrub clean, got rid of all the transients, and hey, great, come on down. It looks great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the ultimate in virtue signaling, and which is just killing people, getting people assaulted. I mean, sexual assaults on these trains, the robberies, the murders. It's off the hook, but this agency is so bass backwards, and only time will tell what's going to happen. Listen, I was telling you the other day that I have some very close friends in LAPD, and most of them either have stopped working these overtime details with working Metro, or they hate to work it, but they want to go out and pay for their new CDU, and so they acquiesce. But in other words, they're so restrained from their own agency about being really proactive. It's just kind of a show of force, and it's I don't want to say they're doing the minimum. I don't want to misrepresent what's happening, but I'm telling you right now, it's not terribly aggressive, and I say aggressive in the sense of real cop work and law enforcement,
But
and so
there's
they
a
don't really enjoy it.
but there's a ray of hope. Well, in a sense, in the summer of 22, I initiated what's called Operation Safe Travel. We flooded the trains with deputies, and we told them hook and book. Don't worry about the MTA, hook and book. And from a May Memorial weekend to Labor Day weekend in 22, they hit the trains hard. We dropped crime by 90% on the trains.
Yeah, I remember this. I remember
And
this.
the MTA would not even acknowledge that it happened. The press would not acknowledge that we had achieved that. So when they're in 23 last year, when they're talking about the buildup to the MTA, they just skipped over the entire success stories of what the sheriff's department has been doing, like it never happened. It's like, wow, when you divorce reality from your decision making, what planet are you on? What's the integrity of that? What's the outcome of your decision? No, because they have so much defensive mechanisms, so many obstacles between being held accountable between them and the average voter that never understands how horrible the people they're putting in office and what they do. Because you're right, it's virtue signaling, is deadly virtue signaling, and they're not riding the trains every day.
Yeah, it really is a travesty. It really is a travesty. But I do remember the operation that you guys engaged in and how successful that it was. And you talked about it. And again, I encourage people to watch the videos you've done riding the train so you can actually, I say expose. It's not like it's hidden. Everybody in LA County who rides the trains, and certainly in certain areas, they know what's going on. They know exactly what the reality is. But I encourage people to watch you as you do that. The final thing that I want to talk about, Sheriff, is we I think we mentioned his name once or twice. I want to talk about Robert Luna, the current sheriff, and his relationship with George Gascon. I met current Sheriff Luna when he was the Long Beach chief, Long Beach Police Department chief, which is in Los Angeles County. For those of you who may not know, so it's a medium-sized, smaller agency, Long Beach, California. I met him when I was the first time when I was I believe, a captain still, and he was a chief, and it was a community roundtable and so forth and so on. I took my impression of him away and kind of put it in my back pocket, and off we went. And I met him a couple times since then, and actually had a long meeting with him actually after I retired when I was in private sector, and about some security issues. But it seems that he has a very interesting relationship with George Gascon, the LA County DA. And one particular example of that relationship I want to talk about is the murder of Los Angeles County Deputy Ryan Klinkenbrummer.
Mm-hmm.
And this is back in September of 2023. He was literally executed. He was in his patrol car at a red light, remember correctly, and he was shot and killed by this animal, this monster. Gives animals and monsters a bad name because I can't think of a word bad enough to call this a-hole. So within a few days, Gascon comes out and he says, we're going to prosecute this guy to the fullest extent of the law. You know, whatever the law allows, he's going to get, as far as I'm concerned. Luna comes out, says the same thing. We're going to go after this guy at the highest possible, punishment. And I'm kind of paraphrasing. Matter of fact, I actually have it pulled up here. If you would entertain me with this, this is Sheriff Luna. This is September 18th of 2023. This is 2 days after the deputy was murdered. And I'm going to read a quote here. Quote, "We are devastated by the brutal murder of Deputy Ryan Klinkenbrummer and sharing the grief with his family, partners, and community as we try to grapple with this tragedy," said Luna. "This ambush attack was absolutely unacceptable and an attack on law enforcement as a whole. Deputy Klinkenbrummer was in uniform, stopped at a red light in his patrol vehicle, like thousands of other law enforcement officers and deputies do every day when he tragically lost his life while serving his community. Our detectives and personnel worked relentlessly for 36 hours to locate and arrest the suspect responsible for Ryan's murder, and we support the charges that were filed today." And this is the kicker. "We expect the maximum punishment available under the law for the murder of Deputy Ryan Klinkenbrummer." 4 days after the murder, this is what George Gascon said. September 20th, DA Gascon announced that he would seek, quote unquote, "the maximum penalty allowable under the law" for this dirtbag. I won't say his name, the murderer, which seemed to be in lockstep with Luna's expectations of the DA's office. What happened subsequent to that? Luna and Gascon held a press conference with the family of the deputy there. After the family had heard these things that I just read, that they're going to seek that whatever punishment under the law, the highest level of punishment. And Gascon says that if I thought the death penalty would bring the deputy back, I would seek it, but it won't. So he's not going to seek the death penalty. And the family, in particular, the mother of the deputy, was outraged. She was completely blindsided with this press conference.
Yep.
She was under the expectation, like everybody else, that the DA would seek the death penalty. This guy was lying in wait. Had special circumstances, everything that would justify a death penalty. And this is the way they treat not only the family, which of course is most important. That's the most important thing right here. But everybody in the county of Los Angeles that expects when someone cold-bloodedly murders an on-duty law enforcement officer, that the DA, the prosecution, is going to do everything they can to hold this animal accountable. They didn't do that. They backtracked on what they both promised. And Luna did not seem to be taken aback when Gascon said this at the press conference. So that's the setup there. I wanted to get that out there. I want to get your take on the relationship in this particular case.
Well, I can tell you this, that the amount of time that my office has overlapped with Gascon, I never, ever met publicly with him because I was totally opposed to everything he represented. He's destroying the district attorney's office. He's an embarrassment to the criminal justice system. And I was the very, very first person to sign the recall of George Gascon when it first became available. And so I would never share a podium with Gascon in any way, shape, or form. And he knows it. So
Good for you.
The fact that Luna stepped up to share the podium with him, he already knew what was going to happen. And he lacked the moral courage to tell the family that they were going to be let down. And that I didn't know anything. And they sprung that one on me being right there with Luna, not knowing what I know about him already. I would have called out Gascon right there, cameras rolling. How dare you?
Yeah.
And but then again,
I know you would have. Because I have watched you. I watched you with Board of County Supervisors meetings. And this is, quite frankly, Sheriff, it's one of the reasons that you were, I think, hated and feared because you spoke your mind.
Mhm.
And not that anybody or everybody has to agree with everything that you say.
No.
That's impossible for anybody. That's not the point.
Mhm.
The point is, I think most people can come to the conclusion by watching you over your 4 years. And again, I was a convert because I didn't know anything about you. And again, I know you're the previous sheriff and your opponent at the time. I thought, who was this guy? But one thing that I can say, I believe that people who know me is that I'm objective. I'm objective. And I can take the emotion out of a particular situation, whether it's friends, families, or whatever it is, political parties. I can sit back and say, okay, let me look at the facts. Let me look at the facts and see what reality is. And over the years, I came to the conclusion that, listen, love him or hate her, whatever it is, as far as delivery or personality, I think that you were approaching this job from a position of what we preach on the show all the time, the rule of law, and a position of serving the community. Those are the two. In other words, do my job, serve the community the best of my ability, and let the chips fall where they may. And so this goes back to this press conference. This is why I'm, on this tirade right now. I wholeheartedly believe that's exactly what you would have done. I don't understand. I can't fathom, and you use this term, I can't fathom the lack of moral courage one must bathe in. If you know, as the sheriff, that this is coming, that the DA is not going to seek the death penalty, and you don't have enough courage to go to the family ahead of time and tell them, I can't, it's not the way I operate. I know it's not the way you operate because I know exactly what I would have done. I can say, listen, I don't agree with this. I don't have any say in it. I've had a conversation with them. I pushed it. I'm not going to mouth off at the press conference tomorrow, whatever it is, but I'm telling you right now, I don't agree. At least that. But he didn't do any of that because the family was completely taken aback. They were
Yeah.
completely shocked.
Totally
And so
off
you know
guard.
that no one can, yeah, they're totally off guard. And this is this family's love, this woman's child, and they're expecting this animal to at least be prosecuted with the hope of getting the death penalty. So I don't know if there are two peas in a pod. I don't know if Robert Luna is an anarchist like George Cascone is. I don't know that. I'm not accusing him of that, but I can say right now, it doesn't seem like he has the least bit of moral courage. And again, I'm going back to the phrase that you used.
He's a man with no convictions. The only thing that's important for him is whatever keeps him in the job, in the good graces of the progressive political establishment. That's why you hear language about relationships and collaboration. And at the end of the day, as I stand before, I mean, all these weird way that he speaks, and he's got beta written all over him. And the job of sheriff is a job. It's an alpha job. It requires moral clarity. It requires conviction. It requires values that you can espouse and instill on your entire workforce to say, hey, this is what we're doing. And yes, we're going to honor the rule of law. We're going to seek justice and fairness in everything we do and make sure the world's a safer place. And if there's something that's in the way, we're going to call it out. We're just not going to, well, let's just not touch that one because it's inconvenient. No, if it's something that's holding the community down, is harming the community, like the MTA, for example, let's call it out. I did a wage theft task force, another one. We put a big thing together with the state labor commissioners. We got a deputy DA assigned to us. And I mean, it was a big show that we put together. It wasn't just a show, it was actually starting to be able to get operationalized all the patrol stations, handle complaints of wage theft from people that don't speak English, for example. And so we can prosecute these cases and get money back and start recovering money.
Mhm.
Everyone ignored it. The Times ignored it. They spent enough time a year later to poke fun that very few people know about it. And of course, maybe they could have just said, hey, this is what we did. But again, it didn't fit the narrative. But
Mhm.
that's $26 million a week is stolen in LA County. Is stolen from the people that can least afford to lose their wages. These are people struggling to make ends meet. And they're the ones that are the most vulnerable victims of wage theft. And it hits women
It
hardest.
it's astounding. Something I touched on from time to time in the show is that when you look across the country, some of the true leaders, I say some, not all, but some of the true leaders in law enforcement are sheriffs. And the reason is because they're almost always elected. It's one thing if you are chief of police or you're, a colonel of this, state trooper agency, you're appointed. So you're pretty much an at will employee. Not so with sheriffs, because you are directly responsible to the people that you serve, not to your boss. And of course, I mean, you are. I mean, we understand that. What I'm saying is that the people that elected you are the ones that can reelect you or not reelect you for whatever reason. And this is why I don't. And this is why we see leadership in sheriff's departments and by elected sheriffs, because they can speak their mind. They can
Mhm.
speak completely like you did for 4 years, completely truthfully from their point of view, speak their mind. They have that authority. One would think, one would think that if Luna really believed that this guy should receive the death penalty, he could have said it and he could have preached that to the citizens of Los Angeles County. Here's why I think that this guy should be subject to the death penalty. And he could say, there's any number of political, avenues of wiggle room with Gascon. Hey, I agree with the DA on a lot of things. We work together on this one, though. There's any number of strategies you can use. And I don't understand why on something like this, you simply can't say what you know is right.
I'll give you a quote from Gil Cedillo, of all people. I met him in 2019, I think my first year on the job. And I visited him at LA City Hall. And he told me, he was older than I am at the time. And he said, well, son, you can be a reformer or you can be reelected. You can't be both. And I thought,
Well
you know
said.
what? I would more than happy to be a reformer. And if the citizens don't reelect me, I'm not going to lose sleep over it because I'm doing the right thing for the right reason. People that get reelected, well, you can see what their work product looks like. Look at the governor, look at the mayor, look at everybody, because
Look at
their number one
California.
job is all about getting reelected. It's not about doing your job. If you do your job, don't worry about the elections.
Well, it's well said. I think it's a perfect way to wrap the show up, Sheriff. I really do. It's again, it's just well said. It's a good place to end it. And just want to thank you again for being on. I hope we can find some more leaders like you, not only in California but across the state. I'm not hopeful, but we got to keep pushing. So if there's anything that you'd like to promote before we leave, I would love to give that opportunity. Any shout outs to your show or to anything else like for people to tune into? Have at it.
Yes, you can catch me on Sheriff Villanueva 33 on both Facebook and Instagram every Wednesday at 7:15 at night. And that'll be tonight also. And then on Twitter, former X now, former Twitter, you can Alex Villanueva with 1L 33. You catch me there. Usually I do one post a day, and I'll nail something that I think is horrendous or needs attention, and it gets a lot of traction. So I'll stay there, and I'll see what happens down the road. No promises, but we're gonna stay engaged, and we're gonna make a lot of people uncomfortable.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. Sheriff Alex Villanueva, thank you so much. It's been an honor. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you again.
All right, sound good. All right, see ya.